Today we're going to be looking at 3 sub $100 GPUs and see how well they perform in 2024 and see if you should consider them for your extreme budget build. So stay tuned.
The 3 GPUs I have in front of me, I have the RX 580, 8GB, which we've already done a video on the channel, so if you haven't seen it, check it out, be in the description. And then we also have a GTX 970 and the GTX 1070. For context, I used to own this same exact 970 and ran it for many years, and it worked for me very well. So let's see how it holds up today. Kind of interested in that. Then we have this GTX 1070, which I've never really compared it to anything or really done anything with it, so interested to see what that does as well.
The first GPU being the RX 580, which I've done a video on already. This was built on the GNC 4.0 architecture, and it has 2,304 GPU cores, and it's clocked with a base 1257 and a boost clock of 1340. This has 8GB of GDDR5 RAM, with the next GPU being the NVIDIA GTX 970, and this GPU is built upon the Maxwell 2.0 architecture, coming in with a base clock of 1050 MHz and then a boost clock of 1178 MHz. This has 4GB of GDDR5 memory, the final GPU being the NVIDIA GTX 1070, and this was built upon the Pascal architecture, and the base clock is coming in now at 1506 MHz with a boost clock of 1683 MHz. This also comes with 8GB of GDDR5 memory, just like the RX 580.
Now you can get all these GPUs for fairly cheap on eBay and on Facebook Marketplace. I recommend staying more towards Facebook Marketplace because it's something that you're buying locally. You don't have to worry about shipping cost or shipping damage. And on top of that, you get to save a little more money on the tax end. So you can get a sweet deal, especially on the GPU, if the person doesn't know what they're selling. So for instance, I've seen these 970s go for about 20 bucks when they go realistically for about 40 or 50 bucks on eBay. The RX 580 goes for about 60 to 70 bucks on eBay, and you can find them sometimes for 50 bucks on Marketplace. And then for the GTX 1070, it's kind of the exception. You'll find them on eBay from anywhere between $70 to $100. And then it kind of is the same on Marketplace. But then again, you can always find someone that's just trying to get rid of something real quick and have a super, cheap price on it that you can just get it for. So with that said, we're going to go through the benchmarks and see what the performance is of these, and then we're going to go into my final thoughts and see why you would really want to consider either one of these GPUs.
First things first, you guys can tell I have a graph for you guys to easily tell the FPS differences, and you have the RX 580 on the bottom, the 1070 on the middle, and then the GTX 970 on the top. It's according with the gameplay footage. Now you'll notice the RX 580 gameplay footage is messed up. That's not the card itself, it's just OBS decided to crap itself while I was recording this stuff, and it had to do something with the encoding and selecting the wrong setting. So I do apologize for that, but it does not affect the performance of the game while I was playing it or the FPS counter, so keep that in mind. So you can see here in Apex Legends that the RX 580 for some reason is tailing the 970, and I think that's just simply due to the fact that Apex Legends tends to like NVIDIA graphics cards more than AMD graphics cards, because I have a 6700 XT in another system that also kind of has weird spikes in FPS with Apex Legends. So I think it's just simply a NVIDIA versus AMD kind of thing in Apex Legends where it just likes NVIDIA better. Same thing here at BMG Drive. You can see that the AMD RX 580 is also kind of lacking. Again, just simply I think due to this game liking NVIDIA GPUs more than AMD GPUs. And again, everything is on the same settings, latest drivers, and it's just one of those things where you really need to test out what games you play and how well they run on different cards, because sometimes you can have a game that runs on a really good AMD card, but will run better on a NVIDIA card simply because the game is better optimized for it. So one of those things you want to keep in mind before you buy a card. Now with Ready or Not, you can see where the tables have turned on the 970. It's getting a lot worse performance comparative to the RX 580. The 1070 still obviously the best option here, but the RX 580 surprisingly having the highest 1% low. Now, only barely going over 100 FPS, but the low being 81 FPS is pretty interesting. And finally, Cyberpunk 2077, you can definitely see the GTX 1070 just reigning supreme once again, and the RX 580 in second place there with a weird 1% low, but it fixes itself on low settings as you can see now, and the GTX 970 just barely hitting 30 frames. And again, on these more modern titles, this is where you can really tell the 970 just starts to become unplayable or just not an enjoyable experience, and why I wouldn't recommend buying a 970 unless like you can get it for super cheap, like $10 or for free. Would not recommend buying it.
So now after the benchmarks, you can really get a little bit of a picture of what these three cards are capable of. Now, this Maxwell 970, obviously, it's struggling in some areas because of its age. But with that said, if you can get it for $20 and you're on a really tight budget, it's not a bad deal. Overall, I would say for the RX 580, if you want an AMD card for super cheap, it's a great card to get. It does run some things a little iffy, like on Apex Legends, we saw a lot of stuttering, but for the most part, it ran great. The 970, I really wouldn't recommend anymore unless you, like I said, on a super strict budget, and you can find it for dirt cheap on Marketplace. And then finally, the 1070. The 1070, in my opinion, is one of the best sub 100 graphics cards that I've tested and seen so far. You can sometimes get a 1660 Super for about $100, but not always. And it is a newer card, but you're going to get the same performance out of it. And sometimes you can even get a super sweet deal on these 1070s. So if you're on a really strict budget, I highly recommend the 1070. But with that said, if you find an even better graphics card for super cheap, go for that.
And for the final conclusion, guys, my recommendation, if you only have $100 to spend on a GPU, definitely go for that GTX 1070. It seems like a really good bargain, especially used. Like I said, you can sometimes get them for like $60-$70 on Marketplace. And then if you only got $50 to spend, try to pick up a $50 RX 580. I mean, it's going to do you well. Specifically the 8GB version. Do not fall for the 4GB version. You want all the VRAM you can get. But yeah, I think you should really consider those two graphics cards if you're on an extreme tight budget. And the 970, again, if you can find one for like $10-$20, then maybe go for it. But just know that just GPU is just really outdated to the point where the 4GB of VRAM is like really holding it back. Now we did see some decent performance out of it, but with that said, it's still going to struggle with a lot of more modern titles, and the more new games that come out, it's going to do worse and worse. So guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys found any other sub $100 GPUs that I could review or stuff like that, just leave them down in the comments below. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and hope you all have a great day.